Hello and welcome to my cave. Thanks for coming back and checking out my channel again. I'm Damien, as always. Today we're going to continue our series with the stone house build. In the first video, we talked about how I often do my doors, how I did this door and others like it. In the last video, we talked about how I shared with you my approach to thatching, how I thatched my roof. And on this one, I'm going to talk about the method I use, the system I use to create the stone walls for the house. I came up with my own approach to making these stones, trying to save myself a little time and trying to make something that looked a little more authentic. All right, so in this video, I'm going to continue showing you some of the techniques I used in this build here, the stone hut with the thatched roof. And today we'll be looking at how I did the stonework, the stone walls for this build. I want you to notice that largely they're of a similar size, but that I did mingle in some larger ones here as well, interspersed, some larger sized stones interspersed with these very similar sized stones as well. Okay, so first of all, there are a couple of methods. I'll briefly cover a method I've done in the past. So this is another build that I did, this tavern build here. And you'll notice the stone chimneys and the method I used for making this stone is different than what I used on my stone house. That method for those chimneys I also saw from Jeremy over at Black Magic Craft. It's great if you buy eggs in, typically, so like I buy these free range Happy Egg Company eggs. So they don't come in a plastic container. They come in this, I don't know what it would be officially called. It's a kind of cardboard, but it almost has the feel and weight and texture of, like, if you've ever made recycled paper. So sometimes people make their own paper, or you can make paper out of like blue jean material, and it comes out like this. So it's not like other cardboards, but this is a good material for making stone. So tear a chunk off of here, and already you can see as I've torn it, I'm getting that sort of organic rough edge. But you can tear this stuff into stone-sized pieces, so like so. And there I have, that would be a larger sort of boulder, and when I tack that down to a surface and give it the clear coat and then paint it to look like stone, that works really well. This is a really great method for doing that. Now, I don't want all my stones that big, because when you look at stone built houses and things to scale, they're not built out of boulders. Again, that would be just going from this minifig here. If that were a stone, that's almost the size of that person. That's a big boulder. And you might have a few of those mingled throughout. They become like anchor stones or cornerstones or, weight load bearing. But you're not going to have a whole house, a whole structure built out of these. Typically, you're going to have like fieldstone size stones. If you look at stone walls and stone houses, they're probably going to be, scale wise, they'll be closer to that size there. I'm going to call it somewhere around a square centimeter size, which is what I went with my chimney and with the stone house build. You'll see these size. I did not use the cardboard method on this. Frankly, initially, the reason I didn't is because tearing these out in that size can be a little tedious. So there I've got, maybe 3 now. And you get quicker at it, and it's nothing wrong with it. And they work. They actually look fantastic. They really do look fantastic. It is great. But man, I'll tell you, my fingertips started getting raw. I just really was not. It was messing with my zen, tearing out all those stones. So I was trying to just experiment and find a different way to get a similar effect. Now the painting job that I would do on this and the method that I'm going to show you is exactly the same. I'm painting them exactly the same. So I'm getting almost an exactly the same looking stone. However, with what I'm going to show you today, with this, I am limited to the depth of this material. That depth of that material, how thick that is, that's all the thicker I can go. I could theoretically stack it up. I could take maybe a few of these and glue them together and make thicker stones out of them. But that's just a lot more steps. And that wouldn't be bad. I mean, that could work too. Some people might find the paper tearing method easier. And then I would just tack those up. I just hot glue. Actually, I use tacky glue for that method. And I start arranging them so that I have little gaps between, but I don't want them to be spread out too far. And sometimes, I'll get one that fits pretty good, but maybe one doesn't fit so good. So I want it to fit. I got a spot that almost fits, but maybe I'll tear a little bit off so that it fits a little better. And that is nice about it. And you can see how you start laying those out on your surface, and this will look like stones with mortar between them when I've painted it all up. Good method, really good. Again, for me, initially I was like, oh, the tedium of tearing all those out. I'd like to find a way to avoid that. So here's what I did. I'll also at some point show you how I did roof shingles, because I do sometimes do like a cedar shake shingle look. And I'm just gonna get in my scrap drawer. Here's a piece of scrap I'll use to show you. But similar concept. Again, I also got the shingle idea from Jeremy over at Black Magic Craft, but I translated that method into this method for making the stones for the stone building. So what I'm going to do first of all is cut this down to we'll call it a length, roughly dimensions of the stone I want. So that's the width of the foam board, which is just slightly more than a ½ inch. I'll cut that down to roughly a square on my foam cutter here. So I've got this. You can see it's about a ½ inch by ½ inch. Maybe slightly more. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be too accurate here. Not a big deal. I think I might actually cut that down a little smaller because those would still be pretty big stones. So I'm just going to pull this in real tight and just shave off till I like the width and length that I have. Yeah. Yeah, something more like that. Closer to 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter. I'm going to pull one more off that side and square it up. All right, there you go. That's more like... See, I just took off a little bit. Now, it doesn't matter. These can be any size you want. This is the size that I like. This is what I wanted. So, I'm going to cut this piece in half. Got two of those about the same size. Again, this is all abouts, getting close to. Now, I'm gonna take this length. I'm going to think about this like a loaf of bread. All right. So I'm gonna make slices out of this. So I want my whole loaf to be roughly the shape of a stone. And I'm going to turn my Proxon down really low. I'm gonna go like a 1.5 maybe. See where I'm at there. When you turn down really low here, you get a lot of control. I use the Proxon cutter. It gets really hot. You have an adjustment dial here. I turn it down to a 1.5, and I can move slow and have a lot of control. And I'm just going to shape this. I'm going to get in there real close and just kind of rip off the corners. And I'm going to go along the edges and kind of just make it jagged and bump it in and make, little imperfections. Pull off any of that stuff because I'm cooking low. I'm cutting on a low temp, so I'm going to get these kinds of stragglers, but it's okay. So I'll keep knocking off the corners. I can maybe turn the heat up just a little bit. People get worried about, don't worry about, you're not going to burn yourself. I've put my finger pretty solidly on the wire by accident, and it's hot, but it won't really burn you. Just be careful and be safe. Move slow. All right, that's pretty good. Let's see, let me get this corner here. So I'm kind of carving with the cutter. Now, there may be other ways to do this. I could have theoretically gotten in here with my knife maybe and just shaved off the corners. You know, like so. I didn't do this, but you could do this even if you didn't have a hot wire cutter. You can maybe get in here and just cut it down. So here's what I got with the wire cutter, the hot wire table. You know, you can see if I just look at that end piece, it looks roughly like a Fieldstone shape. Here's what I've got with the knife. Now it's still kind of, you know, has a lot of corners and edges on it. So I might go back in there with a piece of sandpaper and just kind of knock those edges off. This is going to make probably for a smoother, softer stone shape. But if you don't have a hot wire table, then this might be it for you. So that rounded it a bit. A little too round for me, but that is too square. That could maybe work for you. All right, but I'm going with the method I use. So I have the Proxxon hot wire table, and there are other companies that make this. This is the one that was recommended, so that's the one I bought. It is probably the most expensive, but it is also probably the highest quality. And I've loved it. It's 100% amazing. I have no complaints about the Proxxon table. I have this piece I made. As I said, think of this as a loaf of bread. So I want to cut these down. I'm going to think of this as like a table saw. I'm going to shave off slices of bread. I'm going to go maybe somewhere between a 1/16 and an 1/8 of an inch. Ranging, but roughly 1/16, 1/8 of an inch. So before each time I do this, and this may be a little dithery for some, but again for me this was a lot less dithery than ripping up that cardboard. So I'm going to first break the edge a little bit so it's a bit softer, and then let's see where we're at here. Slice off oops, I didn't turn the key back up. Moving slow. So there you go. I have one stone. That's a pretty decent thick. That's kind of thick, but I could do that. I could do a bunch of that thick. You want variation, so maybe I do this one in thicknesses like that. That's pretty close. That's probably an 1/8 of an inch thick. I'm probably going to go largely thinner than that, though. I don't need them to be really thick. I forgot to sand the top edge, which is okay. I can do it afterwards, but more likely to break. So again, first step, I have this sharp edge. I'll break that a little bit with some sandpaper and then slice it off. Break it. It's just a real quick slice it off. Break it. Break the edge with sandpaper. Real fine grit sandpaper. Super fine grit. Slice it off. I'm making stones here as I go. Each of these slices becomes a stone. Now, if I did my whole building with this one, I'd have a lot of uniformity. And you don't want a lot of uniformity. I mean, these are all roughly the same shape, because they're coming out of a piece that I made at the same time. They're not exactly the same, but they're pretty close. They may be too close for some people's taste. So let's look at these two stones in particular. Those two stones look essentially exactly the same. So for that, I can go in and I can maybe just break a piece off. Look, I just broke that corner off. And that's enough variation that changes that stone so that it's different. Maybe I break another corner off. Whatever. See, I'm getting some variation in there now. It's another case where it's the slow game. Maybe I just go through with my sandpaper and I really hit a corner really hard, right? And now I've changed that corner shape pretty dramatically. Also, just simply turning them as I go. But anyway, I'll cut all these up. And this wouldn't be my only, let's call this a loaf, okay? Let's call that a loaf for lack of a better term. This would be one loaf of stones. I'll cut all those up. There, got myself a little pile of those. Okay? Then I also had the one I cut with the knife. I'm actually going to go back and put some blemishes, if you will, in that one because it's really rounded and soft. So I want to just kind of make it a little bit more stonish. Stone-like. Stony. There, I just roughed that up pretty seriously. Now I've got something a little less clean and nice and more stone shaped. So I'll go in, same thing, roughly the same depth, and cut stones out of that. All right, I'm not going to keep going on that. But anyway, I will have finished off that loaf. I will probably have, for that building, I probably need of that size. So again, if I'm going to call that a loaf that I'm cutting stones out of, I maybe want 6 or 8 of those of different shapes. So I shape this one, I'll shape another one, just because it's an inaccurate process, they'll be different looking. So I'm going to have 6 or 8 different basic stone shapes. And I'm going to throw them all together in a pile or in a jar and mix them all up. So when I have about 6 or 8 different types to choose from, I'm going to be a lot less likely to have 2 stones next to each other that look exactly the same. Now if I go back to my original building here, if I really searched in here, I could find some that are of roughly the same shape. So, I really may have mitigated part of that problem quite a bit. Okay. I don't know if you can see it. There's a stone right here and a stone right here that are essentially the same shape. But I had to go and find them. And you're not likely to do that. And looking at it, again, table distance or even up close, they really don't look the same. And I really only have roughly 5 or 6 different basic stone shapes here. But I did the methods where I broke some a little bit or I sanded some a little bit more, and I just mixed them up. I mixed them all up. And if I put a stone down and I grabbed a second stone and it looked the same, I might just break a piece off, or I might just go grab a different stone. It's okay. But you're going to get that variety so that you don't have a very uniform stone pattern. You want something random. No 2 stones in nature look exactly the same, right? And that works. So I have some stones cut out. There they are. They look great. I didn't sand both sides, so whenever I tack these down to my wall, we're going to call this my wall. Actually, here's my wall. I got my little building stones. Oh, I had said in my original build I had larger field stones, and I just cut those by hand. So I'll just take a piece of scrap, whatever, and I'll just kind of cut a rough stone shape. Maybe. No biggie. This is just any old method. And I'll break off all this stuff that looks silly and, give it a sanding. And there, I mean, that's pretty quick and dirty, but there's roughly a fieldstone, a larger boulder that I might use for an anchor stone or a cornerstone or whatever. I might even go in with my knife and carve some chunks out of it. There, really gives it some more. Gives us some more depth. That's pretty good. And just that quickly, I made a boulder, right? But again, the building's mostly not going to be those. It's going to be largely these smaller fieldstone sizes. All right, and I start tacking them down. And I'm going to get in near the edges, pretty close. I'm even going to take maybe some thinner ones. Actually, I am going to do this because I did it on my build. And it bends pretty easily. Try not to snap it, but give it a good fold. See? So I folded that one, and I can go around a corner. Then I can stick it around the corner of the building there. Hold those for a second because the corner ones want to come undone. The foam is very springy, has a lot of resistance to being folded. So I've got a corner one there. I did a lot of those on the corners. If you try to do that with one of these thicker ones, it'll probably snap, but cut some that are a little thinner so that you can fold them. But I like to have them around the corners. You can see here again, so these are all that one. Well, actually, so this one came up against the corner, but then those three are all bent around the corner there and give a, like it's two sides of the stone look. Like so. And I'll keep tacking these on. Now, a lot of people complain about hot glue being stringy. So as I'm tacking these down, I'm making sure I'm keeping the edge that I sanded facing up. So people complain about getting the little hot glue strings that follow them and go everywhere, and I do get that sometimes. I haven't solved that problem, but if you show some patience and a little bit of a trick you can do to help mitigate so many strings. I'll show you. So I put the glue on the foam, drag it across a little bit, and before I pull the glue gun away, I sort of press it down in and do one of those. I sort of wipe the end of the glue gun off onto the piece I'm gluing. And that, I would say 80% of the time, maybe even 90% of the time, that handles my glue string problem. So no glue string. Just draw the glue across and give it a press and sort of wipe the piece across I glued it to my thumb. Wipe the piece across the tip of the glue gun. I think I said glue stick, but I meant glue gun. Press and wipe. Oh, I got a string on that one. I'm moving too fast. It just does require you to slow just a bit, but not a lot. And you pick it up after a while. All right. Oh, see, I still got a string there. So it does happen sometimes still. Now, I'm just kind of going in fast here. I'm getting a little bit of uniformity there. You might see it does all kind of look similar. So I'm going to start breaking some of these apart so I get like some variation in shape. And I glued it to my desk. There we go. And maybe I'll break a few in half even, and then glue the halves down together so I've got a cracked stone. Right. So that half there, this half here. So look at that, now I've got a stone that's kind of cracked there. It makes some, and I don't want it to be a huge crack, I want to keep it kind of together, but when I paint, the paint gets down in there, I'll have a nice cracked stone. I have a tendency to put those especially down near the base. I'll put a lot of cracked stones near the base where you know they've sort of taken more of a load and are kind of breaking apart over time. Again, so I need some variation here. Just this real quick, I just go in with my thumbnail and snap off little bits of it just to make different stone shapes. I'm also starting to make rows, which I don't want to do. I should be more careful about not making them look like they're laid in rows. I would actually start with maybe putting one in this corner and one in that corner and work my way toward the middle, or start in random places. Put a stone in a random spot and then build around it. And you're going to get less uniformity. See, like I did here, I don't have so many straight across rows of stones like I'm getting here. But I'm moving fast and just showing you really I'm going to let, that's sort of, the technique of the creator, to always be looking for ways to make things look random. So I'd say if I just look there, that's pretty good, but I do see some uniformity there that I wouldn't necessarily want. You may want that. They could have been laid like bricks and they could be very in neat rows staggered like that. It's totally possible. It's not typical. If you look at stone buildings and stone walls, you don't typically have those clean straight rows like that, because stones are not clean and straight like bricks. I got just two more here. I'll tack a boulder on that one that I made. And just stick that here. You can even tack it around the corner there. So that's a cornerstone. I got that boulder, kind of goes around the corner a little bit. And if you do find you got a lot of those strings hanging out, again, back to my hot gun, my heat gun, I don't want to get in close and melt this, but those little strings, these heat guns melt those really fast. They will just disappear. So if I have a lot of strings from hot glue, I just go in like this, see where they are, and give them a quick melt, and they disappear. Again, I like the hot glue. I'm a generally patient crafter, but I should talk about this. I had a piece here that wouldn't fit a whole stone, so I'm going to kind of tear this one down to fit in that gap, which as you start to get full coverage, you'll start tearing stones down to smaller little wedges and things to fit in gaps and whatnot. But anyway, back to the hot glue. I like hot glue. It's quick, it's easy. Tacky glue is needed for some things. I'm generally a patient crafter, but the tacky glue, sometimes I just want to move on. And it doesn't matter, even if I have hot glue in places here, it's all going to be covered with paint. No big deal. But roughly, that's my stone layout. Again, I cut these stones out of that foam. I'm going to use the word loaf, if you will. And then I tack them all down. They're hot glued on, so they're all ready to go. They're not going anywhere. They can be painted right away. Next step. A lot of crafters, a lot of people in this craft use the wadded up wadded up aluminum foil. They have a ball of aluminum foil they use for texturing rock. Works great. And I didn't know about the aluminum foil method before I already had this really nice, knobbly, chunky rock. So this is my texturing rock. I use it for all my stone texturing. It has pointy bits, it has sort of flatter parts, good for rolling over, but this stone makes great stone texture. So my next step after that's all glued down is to go in here and just start rolling it over these stones. I'm stabbing them and busting them and hitting them with my rock, and I roll it around and I turn it around and get different. Now I do have some bits that are extra pointy, and I don't want to just go in with that and hit it over and over again because I'll get a pattern. So I'll roll this rock around on there. Really press down in. I want a permanent dent. I'm denting these stones pretty aggressively. And even if I start to chip them or crack them, no big deal. Looks great. All right, so you can see there, I have just textured those foam stones to look like real stones. Boom, textured, piece of cake. That's my rock. You could use a rock. I'd get one that has a lot of, you don't want a rounded rock, you want something, I think this has a lot of iron in it. You can see the red, so it makes it like this. I found this in our rock landscaping outside of our house, and it was perfect rock. I found like a few of them, and this ended up being my favorite one. But if you wad up a ball of aluminum foil, you'll get a similar shape and does a similar job. I just happen to have that rock, and it's what I always use. The patented Beauchamp texturing rock. Anyway, next up we're going to be into our painting. So I'm going to use my BMC sauce. That's what I'm calling this stuff. And get a brush. We'll go with this guy. And I'm going to put on my base coat. Black paint and Mod Podge. And I want to cover everything. I don't need it to be all totally blacked out, but I do not want to see big chunks of green or pink or blue, whatever color foam you're using. I want to look at it from all angles because maybe the tops didn't get done or the side didn't get done. I don't need a ton of this. It doesn't need to be soaking wet with it. Just a good covering. And this is a junky brush, so I'm really, grinding it down into those gaps in between. Really getting it down between the stones, almost like more toothbrush than paintbrush. Voila! I don't want a lot of this on there because I don't want to lose any of my texture. So I'm thoroughly covered it, but you see I haven't lost all my little dents and dings and things. I haven't lost the texture of the stones in the Mod Podge. That's it. And I'll need to wait for that to dry. Okay, base coat on the stones, nice and dry. I will start working on painting my stone. My base coat is going to be, I use the same painting system for bricks and for stones. So my base is going to be basically just a tan. I went to Michael's locally last time I bought paint, and just the regular Craftsmart tan was out. So I just bought some of this Americana. It's called Fawn, but just a basic sort of tan, just regular flat tan. And that's going to be my base coat of color, or my first coat of color. And I want pretty thorough covering with this stuff. I can use the same brush. I did rinse out the brush from the BMC sauce, but I will use it again. Same brush, just rinsed it out real quick. And I want to thoroughly cover all these stones. That's not to say that I couldn't still have a little bit of the black sort of shining through. I shouldn't say shining through, but I'm not. But I want to get down in all the cracks with this. Make sure I don't miss any edges. Again, sort of look at it from all angles and see if sometimes you'll get little spots inside that you have missed. So look at the piece from all angles and really get down in there. Get down on it. That was weird. All right, and there's my first coat of paint. Now I can wait for that to dry. Don't necessarily need to, because now things will start drying really fast. So going with my heat tool, again, I don't want to cook that foam. I don't want to get in too tight or I will melt the foam. I just keep about a, 2 to 3 inch distance. Keep moving it around. And boom, dry. Just like that. All right, next layer. I'm going to now go in with some, let's see, next I do a little golden brown. Craftsmart golden brown. This is another tan color. It leans toward the red, in there. And I'm just going to, that brush was too big, so I'll get a smaller brush. And I'll go in and I'll use this guy. This is probably my typical go-to brush for a lot of things. And I'm going to select stones and paint them with this just pure golden brown. Try not to get the stone next to it. But still, this might, your mini painting techniques might come into play here if you do that. You don't have to be nearly as accurate. If you make a mistake, you can rub it off. Sometimes my hand will slip and I'll put a big into the next stone over. So I just color them both that color. No big deal. You might have 2 stones that are right next to each other that are the same hue. Really, a lot of this you're not going to see later, so I'm going to dull it all down with dry brushing and then black washing when I'm done. Right there. I've just got a few stones with that golden brown. Now, rinse out my brush. I'm going to do some more stones with just straight gray. Craftsmart gray. Don't need much of that. Just a little tiny bit. And same thing, I'll pick some different stones out and paint them gray. All right. I don't need to worry so much about getting down in between the stones as I did with the first coat. This is just the stone itself. If I slip just a little bit on the stone next door there, I can kind of go in and wipe that off real quickly before it dries, and you won't know. No big deal. And I think I'll actually paint my big cornerstone there this gray too. All right, now variations on a theme. So I still have my tan from my base coat and my little bit of golden brown and gray. And what I want to do now is just cut some of that tan in with the golden brown, mix it up, and I've lightened that golden brown, same color, lighter shade, for more variation. And I'll paint yet some more stones. So you can see there now, there's the golden brown, and there's the tan, and there's the golden brown and tan. I do have 3 distinct shades there. Trying to get a clean tip on my brush. There we go. In fact, I'll put one of these golden brown and fawn mixes right next to the golden brown, and you can see right there how we have 3 distinctive shades of that same color just from adding a little bit of that original tan. I think I'll paint my cracked stone here in that one too. All right, and then I'm going to do the same thing with the gray. So I have this gray that I had. I'm going to pull in some of the tan to that and make a grade tan. I just use the end of my brushes to pull paint and do mixing. And you see I've changed the shade of that gray now to a very, very pale tan or very pale gray. It almost gets close to like this other color I like, this suede. I've pretty much made that shade. I could just use the suede, but I'm going to use that for dry brushing here in a minute. But I've gotten close to that shade with the gray and brown, the gray and tan mixed together. And pick some more stones. So I'll go right here next to this gray one so you can see the difference. So you can see now there's a tan stone, there's my tan and gray, and there's my gray right next to each other. Clearly not the same as either of those. I have another variation on the gray. And I end up with essentially 5 different stone shades here. Now I've seen, I think the, I forget his name, the channel Bard's Craft. He uses blue, and I have been playing around with using blues in my stonework. I don't feel confident with it yet. I'm going to keep working on that because you do find a lot of blue in stone. And Bard's Craft channel, fantastic channel. I follow it. You can find it in my channels list. He does a lot of blue-based stone, and it looks great. And I really want to do more of that. So I'm going to keep playing with the blues. But right now I've mostly got, these are all warm colors. They look fine. I'm happy with it. But that's all that. So that needs to dry, and I can dry that quickly again here with my heat tool. And I really want this to be totally dry before I start doing my dry brushing. And there we are. These cheap acrylics dry so fast. They got a nice matte finish. It even feels like stone texture when you get that right. All right, now onto the dry brushing. I'm going to need a clean brush, clean dry brush, and it can be, I'll go a little larger, go with this size here, and I'm going to go in there with suede. I use suede a lot for dry brushing both wood and stone. I'm not sure what it's called in other names, but luckily I have another bottle of it here. Craft Smart makes the suede, and I love it. It's a great shade for dry brushing. All right, now with all dry brushing, everybody does dry brushing. You need it's obviously not totally dry. You have some paint on it, loaded it pretty good, but almost no paint. Really pull off most of the paint on a paper towel. I got a big dollop there, which I'll go back to and use. Let's see where we're at. Yeah, I need a little bit more, dry it off too. So mostly dry. See, I painted on my hand and you can kind of see it, but barely. See, that would have been too much. And I'm just going to hit all the stones with that first coat of dry brush. And you'll see where it had been very bright, especially the golden brown stones had been very bright. That is now muted quite a bit. And there you go, there's my first dry brushing. You see it really sort of desaturated those stones so they're not so vibrant. I might do a little bit more actually. All over the stones. And there they are, first dry brushing. Now, second dry brushing. Again, I like this color. This is a vanilla by Craft Smart. It's a white, but it's not a bright white. No, it's not a titanium white. It's vanilla, so it's almost a creamy. It's not exactly an off-white per se. I guess it's slightly off-white, but load the brush on there and get it really dry, really dry. Test it on something maybe. That's probably pretty good. And this is going to be my light. So I'm only doing downstrokes. I'm starting at the top and pulling it quickly down like so. And this is just going to really highlight the top edges of the stones. And that represents sort of your light direction. I could come in at an angle if I want my light direction, but up, down, from the top down, at whatever angle you want. I always just kind of go straight down. Doesn't matter. And you'll see then I've got this highlight around these edges, the top edges of the stones. And that's all my dry brushing. That's all I do for that. Now again, I want a thorough drying. I want my dry brush layers to be totally dry. Dry brush layers totally dry before I do my black wash. So if I throw wash onto wet or even slightly damp dry brush layers, I'm just going to wash them right off. I'm going to turn it into mud. All right, this should be dry. Oh yeah, very dry. It feels very dry. Let it cool a bit and harden. All right. I'll rinse out this dry brush, but I'll use it for my black wash too. And now when you're washing, it's almost like dry brushing. You just kind of, I even just kind of go through and do a slapping method like this. I don't want to get in there and really grind it or paint it because I will remove, this wash is mostly water and it will remove your dry brush layers. So pretty wet, maybe not dripping wet, but you know. Don't be afraid of the black wash. The black wash is your friend. Let it get down in the cracks. Like so. Maybe give it a tap. And then I'm even going to take off just quick little dabs of the paper towel. Boom. And if at any point you feel like you've overdone something, go back and do it again. If you feel like the wash muted your stonework way too much, go back and re-dry brush. Hit those highlights again. You can do that as many times as you need to. I would say I couldn't be happier with this. This is perfect. Now, I think you'll notice especially where this took effect is in my big boulder cornerstone here. Now, that looked pretty good. But when I hit it with the black wash, look how it got down into those little bits. And really, I mean, that looks like a stone to me. I couldn't be happier with that result. Looks great. So that's how I did my stonework for my stone house that I created. Of course, when everything is done, so there's my thatched roof piece I put on, there's my stonework I've done on my door now that I've done as well. I'll of course clear coat the whole thing. I'll show you all that part of the process when I have it done, but there's the next step. That's how I do stonework for my stone house.